Looking for NFL football? Stop right here. You found your home for weekly NFL talk and fantasy football. Coming to you live from the BackupPunter.com. This is the Backup Punter Podcast. Now, here's your host, the man who thinks fullbacks win championships, Keegan Matheson.
It's the Backup Punter Podcast episode number 20. We've made it to the anniversary. Whatever it is, bronze, silver. What anniversary is 20? I don't know, but we've made it this far. We have not been canceled. Thank you for your continued support of the Backup Punter Podcast. My name's Keegan Matheson, here with you as I am every week. You can find me on Twitter at the Backup Punter. Visit the website, thebackuppunter.com. I've finally got some content going up there now. After a bit of a dry summer, I'll admit. But we're getting some rankings up, and we started that off last week with our quarterback rankings. Got those up on the website on the last podcast. Check that out if you haven't already. And subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Find the Backup Punter Podcast. Subscribe it, like it, star it, listen to it. Hope you enjoy. And as always, tweet in your questions. It's fantasy football season. Get involved. We'll talk about it. And this week, we're going to do our running back rankings. This is probably the most difficult group to rank because there's still so many question marks. You look at Dallas, you look at places like New York, New England, the Jets. Who is going to be the lead guy? Even if there is a lead guy, is it going to be enough? I'm not sure. So we're going to get into that today, 1 through 30, and I'm going to give you some Tier 1 flyers and some Tier 2 flyers, some deep sleepers. You know how much I love sleepers, so we'll talk about that. Now, as always, the Backup Punter Podcast brought to you by the good people at Dynasty Sports Empire Podcast Network and Dynasty Sports Empire Fantasy Sports. So check them out today on Twitter, DSE_football. That's DSE_football. Get yourself involved in a Dynasty Startup Fantasy Football League today. They start at $50. Most fun you can have playing fantasy football. And if you're looking forward to the, a few months from now, getting into an NHL, NBA league, jump in that as well. I might have to try to get involved in an NBA league this year. It's kind of the unconquered sport in my arsenal. So maybe I'll see you there. Now, before we get into it, maybe we'll talk a little news. A little Geno Smith news, maybe. He got knocked the hell out in the locker room. This had to be the funniest text message I've ever gotten in my life. I'm at work during the day, and when I'm at work, I'm not on Twitter as often as I am at home because that's borderline unhealthy. And I get a text from my friend Matt, and it says something along the lines of, I wish I had it in front of me, but Geno Smith got punched in the jaw in a locker room fight. He's out 6 to 10 weeks. And it's one of those things you look at and you think this isn't true, but it has to be. So, of course, I jump on Twitter, I jump online on my phone and read this story. And the linebacker, whose name I won't do him the disservice of mispronouncing, is apparently over a $600 plane ticket. Now, what happened is Geno Smith had agreed to go to this guy's football camp in the off-season, but unfortunately, Geno Smith had a close friend of his was killed in a motorcycle accident just before the camp. So he couldn't go, but the plane ticket had already been purchased, and Geno Smith allegedly owed this guy $600. Now, a lot of people are putting this on Geno. They're saying this is a lack of leadership, and I think Chris Carter said something ridiculous about that. And I don't blame Chris Carter. That's just, if you overanalyze the NFL like we do now in modern television, you're going to say 1,000 things. One of them's going to be stupid. Fine, whatever. But to be honest, I don't think Geno Smith is completely without blame here. I shouldn't say blame, but do you see Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Cam Newton, any of these real franchise quarterbacks getting involved in something this stupid? Now, the obvious response to that is, well, Cam Newton was in a fight just the other day. Well, that's a practice field scuffle, which happens all the time. Regardless of how much ESPN wants to blow it up and make it seem like a story, it's not a damn story. It happens 100 times a day. Geno Smith's getting punched in the jaw in the locker room. And I know this guy's a hothead. He shouldn't have been on an NFL roster. Arrested for battery of a police officer, but sure, let's take a risk on him. It's the NFL, and being a quality person doesn't matter. But a broken jaw to your franchise quarterback. Now, one thing, there's no hot take I can give you here. It's kind of hilarious. It's kind of tragic. It's 100% New York Jets. I'm not going to try to analyze this. One thing I will leave you with, though, just an interesting thought, because I always want to offer you up just a different way to think of things. If this had have been Geno Smith punching that linebacker in the jaw and breaking his jaw, how do you think the story would have went then? Geno Smith wouldn't have been cut, God no. And part of me thinks that New York media almost would have, they would have trashed him because New York media is ridiculous. But I think some fans almost would have thought, wow, there's Geno, there's a little fire, because he's kind of got that Jay Cutler docile way about him. Throw an interception and saunter off the field. But it's interesting, it's in the NFL, you don't have to be a good guy, you just have to be a good player. We see that time and time again. Geno Smith, he's not a very good player, but he's also not good at taking punches, I guess. Then, earlier today, I'm recording this podcast quite early. I'm recording this on Thursday, August 13th. The news just came out. T.Y. Hilton got a massive extension. T.Y. Hilton's great. I love the guy, but he is getting money that more talented receivers than him are getting. He's getting that kind of Dez Bryant, that money that'll be coming to Julio Jones, Demaryius Thomas, that type of money. And that kind of changes the landscape. Now, Drew Rosenhaus, say what you will about the guy. I could say 1,000 things, and none of them would be complimentary. He gets his men paid. If I were an NFL superstar, I'd probably want him as my agent. Wouldn't hang out with him on the weekends, but I'd want him as my agent. T.Y. Hilton is interesting in this sense because he's a small, fast receiver. He's not really a guy that you think of as a franchise receiver, despite his statistics. When you see franchise receiver, you picture 6'2" or taller, 200 pounds or heavier. This big red zone guy, and that's just kind of a fault of our perception. So T.Y. Hilton's much different, but you know what? Even if it's an overpay, whatever. If you're going to overpay, make it for your star players. That's what T.Y. Hilton is, and he's going to grow old with Andrew Luck, and they're going to do a lot together. He's going to put up some massive numbers. Put T.Y. Hilton on the Cleveland Browns. I don't think he's that great of a player. But again, don't overpay for a reserve linebacker. Don't overpay for your third corner. Overpay for a superstar. Get your star. You can find other pieces in other places. So that's my thought on that. I'm still laughing about Geno Smith, but that's a little bit rude of me. And as a Packers fan, it just, you look at that and you think, what the hell's going on? As a fan of most teams, you look at that and you think, what the hell's going on there? So I'm sure there'll be a little more on that over the next few weeks. But Ryan Fitzpatrick's season has begun, and they even reached out to sexy Rexy Grossman. I'm not sure if the NFL will allow a team to have Rex Grossman and Ryan Fitzpatrick on the same roster. That's got to go against some fairness of play initiative. So let's get into our running back rankings. And right off the top, let's talk about how we rank players, because if you are me or anything like me, well, don't be anything like me, but like me, you've probably been reading a lot of rankings. Running back rankings, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback. One thing that I often notice, and this is something for you to look for, I get a kick out of this when I will be, especially doing a mock draft. I've done a lot of mock drafts the last few days. I'll be looking at rankings, and I'll see the number 15 wide receiver, and then the number 16 wide receiver. But the number 16 guy is projected to have 10 or 12 more points on the season. And I've had two different people ask me about this. Why aren't they just ranked by projected points? Why shouldn't I just pay attention to that? I can't speak for other people's rankings, because I'm not sure how they do theirs. For my rankings, there will be places where the number 23 guy won't be projected as high, where the number 23 guy will be projected to score more over the season than the 22. Something like that. When that happens for me, it's a matter of consistency. And that is why someone like LeGarrette Blount is not inside my top 30. I think that LeGarrette Blount will end the season with more points than some of the players listed in my top 30. But I think he'll have weeks where he has 1 point. Think of this in terms of an MLB starting pitcher. Do you want a guy that's going to go out there every day and give you a strong outing and just allow a few runs? Or do you want a guy that goes shutout, blow up, shutout, blow up? I want the reliable guy. And especially in fantasy, when you're looking at a short season, I don't want a running back that's going to have 3 weeks out of his 12 in the regular season that are just going to stink the joint up. Because if you're, an RB1 or a high-end RB2 and you get that dud week, that sinks your roster. You've got to hope your opponent does something equally bad, which isn't a great strategy. Trust me, I rely on that often. So there will be some places where guys are just ranked higher because you can rely on them. And as I said, I did stay away from the New England Patriots backfield altogether. I'm not sure why that was so hard to say, New England Patriots backfield, but I stayed away from them because there are so many weeks where Bill Belichick just says, you know what, it's not Blunt's week, it's Gray's week. Maybe Tavares Cadet has a big week receiving. There's so many factors there that I'm not terribly comfortable with. Same thing with the Jets. I know Chris Ivory's going to get a lot of carries, but how many? Will it be enough? Is he going to be 2 touchdown reliant? And then you look at the New York Giants. Is it going to be Vereen, Andre Williams, Rashad Jennings? I don't know. And one of those, I almost guarantee you, is going to finish within the top 30. But I don't want to take that 1 in 3 chance of guessing who. I do like Andre Williams a bit more. We'll get to that later. But these are situations where you're taking a bit of a risk. So let's kick off the top 30 backup punter running backs for fantasy football in 2015. And at number 1, it does kill me to do this a bit, but I do have Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson of the Minnesota Vikings, and I think one of his best friends this year is going to be Teddy Bridgewater. He looked very sharp in the Hall of Fame game. Granted, he only threw, I think, 7 passes. But reports out of Vikings camp have been really high on Teddy B. Adrian Peterson, he's got a year off football, paid. Anyways, he's going to come back fresh. He is not your regular 30-year-old running back. He still owns the body of a 25, 26-year-old. Don't worry about age this year. Also, I don't feel that the Vikings are going to try and protect him as much as some people do. A lot of people have this thinking that the Vikings want to get 3-4 more years out of Adrian Peterson. They're going to try to protect the guy. I think they're going to run him into the ground. They're not going to intentionally trash him, but I don't think they're going to hold back at all. He's going to get more catches out of the backfield than most people think, I believe. And he is someone who, even when his team is losing, he will be getting the football. Very few running backs in the NFL run the football when their team is down. Adrian Peterson is one. And with the Vikings defense, they're going to keep it close. I like this guy in terms of counting stats and in terms of consistency. Number 1 running back, Adrian Peterson. Number 2, I've got Eddie Lacy. Now, he was ranked the number 1 fantasy player by ESPN earlier in the offseason. I don't know why the hell you release fantasy rankings in the middle of the summer because they don't mean a damn thing, but clicks are clicks, so go for it. Anyways, with Eddie Lacy, the thing you need to worry about is September. He has started out terrible in September over the last few years. At the end of the month last season in 2014, I'm not sure if he was even in the top 30 running backs ranked. Now, if you made a trade for him or if you hung on to him, good for you because that was a smart move. This year, I think he's going to start out a little quicker. But still, you're not going to have the number 2 running back by the end of September. What you are going to have is one of the hottest running backs in the league down the stretch when you need him to win your league. Eddie Lacy, after the first month is gone, will be reliable. He will be someone who scores you touchdowns, and he's going to chip in a few more receiving points than people think. They look at Eddie Lacy and they see this big, bulky guy. Well, he gets fed some pretty dirty little screen passes from Aaron Rodgers. Maybe not as many this year as he had last year. He's not going to hit his 4 receiving touchdowns from last year, but if you're drafting Eddie Lacy as the second running back, even the first running back, I can't argue with you. And again, any of these top few running backs, if you take them first, who am I to argue with you? These guys aren't going to be separated by 50, 80 points. They're going to be separated by 5 or 10 points. So if you disagree with me, tell me why, because I'm interested to see, because this is, this top 3 or 4 group, it drove me a little nuts, because there's a good argument for each and every one of them. So that's Peterson and Lacy to start us. And number 3, Le'Veon Bell of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If it were not for his suspension, I'd probably have Le'Veon Bell ranked number 1. I don't think the 2-game suspension means much, but it just makes you have to tinker a little bit at the start of the season. And if you're starting kind of a scrub running back as your RB2 because of Bell and you lose a game, that hurts. That's going to suck. And I think some people, in spite of that, have gone too far the other way. In 2 mock drafts I did yesterday, Yahoo 12-team standard scoring, in both of them, I got Le'Veon Bell with the 5th overall pick. I was doing some 5th pick ones just to work out how that's looking for the round 1 and 2 turn. Both of them I got Le'Veon Bell, and I think that's a bit too low. I think Le'Veon Bell has to be in your top 3, however your top 3 looks. In my opinion, Le'Veon Bell is, if he's not the most valuable keeper for the next 5 seasons, he's the second most valuable. If you're in a keeper league, you want Le'Veon Bell. He's going to produce all game long, whether they're up by 30, down by 30. He's on the field. He's a workhorse, receiving game plus. I think he's a no-brainer. Draft Le'Veon Bell, then pick up D'Angelo Williams, his backup to start a couple weeks to get you out of the gates, or find someone later on, Doug Martin, someone who's a starter but not rated very high. You'll survive. You will get to Le'Veon Bell, and then after 2 weeks, you'll have one of the strongest running back positions in your league. Then at number 4, someone who I am seeing going number 1 a lot, that's Jamal Charles. If he stays healthy this year, I think he's 29. That's okay. He's not a big body guy, so some people do think there's injury risks. I don't know. I think they're going to cut back on Jamal Charles' workload this year, but I don't think that's a bad thing. He's going to be included in that passing game, and as they push the ball upfield more, that's not going to cut into his receiving stats. People really look at these things one-dimensionally, and that's wrong to do. They hear that the Chiefs are going to push the ball up the field, and they say, well, up the field, that's not where Jamal Charles is. Wrong. If they are stretching the field, that means finally, for the first time in a few years in Kansas City, linebackers are going to be on their heels. Safeties are going to start drifting back and holding back. That opens things up for Jamal Charles. He's going to have no problem. Top 4 running back all day long. Number 5, I've got Marshawn Lynch of the Seahawks. I'm still worried he's going to fall off a cliff. I don't think this year, maybe next year, if he doesn't retire, because he's someone who will retire out of the blue and surprise us, I think. I do like him. The offensive line makes me a bit nervous. And I think with Jimmy Graham, there might be a touchdown or 2 that go his way instead of Lynch's, but come on, this guy's still an elite fantasy option. And I think if you get him this year, you're going to be fine. Again, you definitely want a Lacey or a Bell if you're looking for a keeper league. So if you've got that top 5 pick in a keeper league, I really think you should go after Lacey or Bell. Because with Lynch, this might be the last year you get from him, maybe one more. Same with Charles, maybe. Same with Peterson, maybe. With Lacey and Bell, you've got 5 more. So I've got Lynch at number 5. He'll be a touchdown machine again. Number 6, C.J. Anderson of the Bengals. There's still 5% of me that's nervous he's going to lose that starting job, just like has happened in Denver for the past 2 seasons. But if he stays in there, especially in that offense with Gary Kubiak made Steve Slayton look good. If you don't know who Steve Slayton is, look him up. He was not an extremely talented running back. He was a small, little guy. C.J. Anderson has the talent. He's going to catch some balls, and he's going to get a workload because he could be the bell cow there. He's my number 6 guy. I like him in the first round all day. Now, speaking of guys who are going to fall off a cliff real soon, Matt Forte. I've got him at number 7. I'm not terribly comfortable about ranking him at number 7. He's probably going to slide down if I do alter these at all. But for right now, I do like Matt Forte, at least from a usage standpoint. He is going to get all the footballs he can handle. So even if he does fall apart, he's still going to put up the counting stats. And he'll be one of these guys where you see the narrative on ESPN through the week, oh, well, Matt Forte is really slowing down. But you look at your roster and you still got 12, 14 points from him. Because he's going to get the ball, and get the ball, and get the ball. I like him there. Again, if you're in a keeper league, there's not much value with Forte. If you're in a keeper league, I might take my number 8 running back instead of Forte, who's Jeremy Hill of the Cincinnati Bengals. Much like a Lacey or Bell, you're going to get 5 years of keeper value out of Jeremy Hill. Now, it's not a big sample size, the last half of last year, but during that last half, he was, in my opinion, the best running back in football. He was unstoppable. Granted, he was a little more fresh than the defenders, so that's an issue to consider. But he is going to be a touchdown machine. If he can start to get the odd little dump pass, screen pass to add that 1 or 2 points a game, that's all the more valuable. But I think with A.J. Green having a big year, this offense is going to move the football. Tyler Eifert having a big year, they're going to move the football. Jeremy Hill is going to benefit, and he can still do damage in between the 20s. He's going to move the chains, and he's going to be the guy that gets any and all carries in the red zone. You've got to love Jeremy Hill. And I don't even like ranking him number 8. I wish I could put him higher. Now, you can't put him over an Anderson, Lynch, Charles, Bell, Lacey, Peterson, but I want to. I might have to tie him with someone. Moving down the list here, we'll speed up as we get further from the top 10, but LaShawn McCoy I've got at number 9. Kind of like Matt Forte is my opinion on LaShawn McCoy. I think he's going to see a million footballs. Now, he's got guys like Fred Jackson there who's going to take some carries. Hell yeah, Fred Jackson. I wish I could rank Fred Jackson number 1. He's one of my favorite players in this whole league. But I think LaShawn McCoy is going to see a ton of receptions. And Rex Ryan has said that. Rex Ryan, I think, said that LaShawn McCoy could go for 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 receiving. That's a little bold. It's a bit bold from Rex. But it's possible. Whoever's playing quarterback there, whether it's Tyrod Taylor, who I think should be playing quarterback, Matt Castle, it's not going to be E.J. Manuel, judging by the reports I've been reading. Judging by the reports I've been reading, E.J. Manuel might not even make this roster, which is sad because I do like the guy, but it's not working. So whoever that quarterback is, obviously none of them are Aaron Rodgers. None of them are Andrew Luck. They are going to want cheap dump-off yardage when they can't find something else. So they'll take a look around. Is Sammy Watkins open? No, he's double covered. Charles Clay open? Not yet. Better panic. Better get it off to LaShawn McCoy. And that's okay, because that's so much better than trying to force a pass. I think LaShawn McCoy might have a little bit of trouble. I don't want to say trouble when the weather turns cold in Buffalo, but those turn into more inside the tackle, slug-it-out games. Might be a little more difficult on his body, but then again, Philadelphia isn't Florida. So I don't think age will catch up with McCoy quite yet. This year, I do like him, and he's still got a year or two of keeper left in him. Number 10. Speaking of Philly, DeMarco Murray at number 10. His usage this year isn't something that I can nail down at all. I don't have a damn clue how DeMarco Murray is going to be used. And a lot of people are running with him as this guy who might even flirt with that 1,400-yard mark again or so. And I'm not sure. And when I say that, I'm not saying, I don't know if he's going to do that. I'm saying I literally have no idea, because Chip Kelly is saying that he wants to get Ryan Matthews 8, 10, 12 touches a game. Ryan Matthews is a guy that can't stay healthy, but he's talented. Is DeMarco Murray going to stay healthy? Well, I'll post the article soon on the Backup Punter Twitter account, at the Backup Punter. But as history would tell us, running backs who touch the football as much as DeMarco Murray, they have a lot of trouble staying healthy the next year. They have a lot of trouble putting up fantasy football points. A lot of them take over a 20% drop. So it's something to look out for. DeMarco Murray isn't someone that I'll draft unless I get really good value. Looking at a guy like Anderson or Charles, as long as I'm in the neighborhood, I'll draft those guys. DeMarco Murray has to be someone that falls a bit to get to me. But he's at number 10. Number 11, a guy that I might have ranked a little bit higher than most, Lamar Miller of the Miami Dolphins. I was worried that Jay Ajayi was going to take some carries. Apparently, he isn't taking snaps at all. He's been running with the kind of scout team down in Miami. That's going to change. Ajayi will see the field at some point this season. But Lamar Miller is looking like an every down back. Especially with the weapons around him, I think it's going to open up. That offensive line does scare me. That's why I had Ryan Tannehill ranked a little low last week in our quarterback rankings, episode 19 of the podcast. But Lamar Miller is as athletic as nearly any running back in this league. He showed it towards the tail end of last year. He had a massive run, I think almost in his last game. If he can get involved every down and they commit to him, he's somebody that can definitely climb into the top 10. Number 12, the polar opposite of Lamar Miller, I've got Alfred Morris. If you listen to this podcast, you know I love me some Alfred Morris. But I think I like him on the real football field a little more than the fantasy football field. I'm still not buying all this crap about Matt Jones being the second coming. He was overdrafted and he wasn't that great at Florida. We'll see. Go ahead and prove me wrong. That's absolutely fine. But with Alfred Morris, you're going to get a two-down running back who depends on the success of his team. And he's on a terrible team. So that worries me. I don't think Robert Griffin is going to do enough this year to take the pressure off Alfred Morris. But still, like a Frank Gore type, he's just going to plod ahead. He's going to get 3, 4, 5 yards. Very rarely will he get 1 yard. Very rarely will he get 8 yards. But he's going to chip away, and he's going to give you those weeks where he does have a touchdown. He'll be the goal line back. And I still think that he'll creep over that 1,000-yard mark, get you 6, 8 touchdowns. I see him finishing in the 11, 12, 13, 14 range, points-wise. There's not a lot of upside there, but if you get him to fall down to you at a good value, a lot of people are overblowing the anti-Morris thing. So maybe people in your league are extra low on this guy and he falls to you. Snatch him up. He's going to be reliable as an RB2 if you can get him there. If he's your RB1, but he's a very high-end RB2. So keep him in mind. Don't target him, I don't think, but keep him in mind. Number 13, I've got Justin Forsett of the Baltimore Ravens. I think he's going to be great out of the backfield again, especially in his second year there. There's not a ton of competition for playing time, at least not starting snaps. He's going to be their number one guy this year. Hopefully they can still stretch the field enough without Torrey Smith. Not that Torrey Smith did much, but he at least took some safeties with him when he ran up and down the field all day. I don't know if Brashad Perryman can do that just yet. I don't know how this offense is going to look. They need some of their depth receivers to step up. But Justin Forsett, again, he's going to get the touches. What he does with them, I don't know. But to a certain extent, it doesn't matter, as long as he gets touches and goes forward. That's up to 13. Number 14, Mark Ingram. This is one I struggled with. I had him ranked about 6 different places. If you could see my notes right now, you would see Mark Ingram scratched out many different times. This is, I think, where I'm comfortable with him. I continue to struggle with how they're going to break it up between he and CJ Spiller, because I just really like CJ Spiller down on that New Orleans turf. But again, Mark Ingram is going to be the number one guy. Most importantly, he's going to get the red zone touches, goal line touches, and really any between the tackles work. CJ Spiller's a guy that they need to use carefully. He's someone that when he gets onto the field, the other team might realize, well, obviously they're going to do something funny with CJ Spiller, either a pass or a big stretch run. Maybe they shut that down, and Ingram really takes over. So I do like Ingram. There will be weeks where you need him to score a touchdown, but I think the Saints will be in close games very often, so he's a good pick there at 14. Number 15, my boy, Frank Gore. I like him there with the Indianapolis Colts. I've actually got him as a keeper in one of my leagues. Now, he's got a tough matchup week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. But again, I think he's going to, much like Alfred Morris, just creep over that 1,000 yards probably. Maybe 6, 8 touchdowns. And he's going to be a good RB2 if you get him there. A very good RB2. And he's one of these people with almost 0 keeper value going beyond this year. But he's someone that if he reaches me at a good value point, you know what you're getting. Unlike maybe the guy ranked behind him at 16, Melvin Gordon. Now, I have high hopes for Melvin Gordon, but you don't really know what you're getting yet. With Frank Gore, you can sit back and say, okay, pretty much every week I'm going to get 9, 10, 11 points, something like that. I'm not going to have these zeros, these 4-point weeks. With Melvin Gordon at 16, he's someone I will be targeting for the right value because the upside with him is fantastic. Especially at this point, if you can get a Melvin Gordon and he does turn out to be a star running back, well then you've got yourself a great keeper for quite a nice value. Gordon's probably going in or around the 4th round, and I'm okay with that. The only worry with him is that Danny Woodhead will be stealing a lot of the receiving downs, and especially in around the goal line. They like to just sneak him in around linebackers, use Danny Woodhead around the goal line. Well, which does bug me. I'm someone who's owned Ryan Matthews enough to know how they use Danny Woodhead. But if Melvin Gordon can prove he's a capable receiver, he has back-end top 10 fantasy potential. So I'm going to watch him. Number 17, Jonathan Stewart of the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, he needs to stay healthy. If he's healthy, he's one of my favorite backs in this league. His thighs are absolute hams. And I'm not calling the guy fat. He's just extremely muscular. And I appreciate that. He is a low, thick bowling ball of a running back. The offensive line in Carolina is pretty embarrassing, to be honest with you. But having Cam Newton in the backfield alongside you kind of counteracts that. It's like Alfred Morris when he had the big season with RG3 when he was really on. It's because people, even despite a so-so offensive line, they've got one eyeball on the quarterback. Even if Stewart's healthy for 14 games, I think he can put up top 15 fantasy numbers, and he should take some goal line touches. I know Cam Newton's a threat for those, but I think if the Carolina coaching staff has the choice between Cam Newton, the $100 million man, sticking his head in at the goal line, or Jonathan Stewart, the aging running back, sticking his head in at the goal line, they're going to give the ball to Stewart. It's kind of heartless, but that's how it works. Looking at number 18, this is a bit higher than some people have him. Whatever. I've got Todd Gurley of the St. Louis Rams. I don't think he's going to see much play in the preseason or through camp. It's one of these things where, is he going to need weeks and weeks and weeks to build up? I think he's a natural at the position, so I don't think he's going to need too long. And then again, how is Trey Mason going to factor into all of this? Is Trey Mason going to take all the passing down work? We're not sure yet. But once Todd Gurley is back to full health, Jeff Fisher wants this guy to be a workhorse. He wants the bell cow. And Todd Gurley's certainly built for it. I don't think the knee injury concerns me at all. Only the timetable of it. The actual health, not a worry for me right now at least. I've got him at number 18. If you can get him at a decent value, he has keeper written all over him for a lot of seasons. Following Gurley, a guy that I didn't even want to rank him this high. I might move him down eventually. That's Carlos Hyde of the San Francisco 49ers. He doesn't have a quarterback. He lost his two best offensive linemen. He hasn't proven that he can do it at this level. Yes, he, just like Joseph Randle, he looked good when he was on the field last year and so on. Well, when the backup running back is on the field, that's a lot of draw plays. It's a lot of, base defenses, but they're not taking the running back seriously. So I don't care much about that. The pieces he has lost around him are going to make it really tough. And I don't think the 49ers are going to be up in a lot of games. So I don't think there's going to be 60 minutes of running snaps for him in each game. There's not going to be. So Carlos Hyde, he's more talented than a 19 running back, but in terms of situation, even 19 I think is a bit optimistic for him. For me to draft Carlos Hyde, he would have to come to me at a value that's a couple rounds below what most people have. I'm not jumping at him at all. So right behind him, I do have the guy I just mentioned, Joseph Randle, in Dallas. This is where it gets risky. Now, where I left out teams like the Giants, Patriots, and Jets, I did include the Cowboys because their upside of a number one guy is so great. Much greater than it is with those three teams. It looks like it's going to be Joseph Randle. I'm sick of the conversation. I can't listen to another podcast, another show without hearing 45 minutes on Joseph Randle. Yes, he rushed for 6 whatever yards last year. I don't care. A lot of it was draw plays. Yes, a lot of it was against base defenses. But what kind of sample size are we looking at here? If you cut up seasons from any running back, you can probably find a series of 40 or 50 carries where they looked like a god out on the field. I mean, you need to see this over a full season. You need to see how his body takes wear and tear. And that's just something you're going to have to take a risk on. The upside is extremely large there with that offensive line. And with Tony Romo, who is a very good quarterback. This is just a situation where we can only know so much. We try to overanalyze this. It's ridiculous. All we know is that he probably will be the starting running back. I still like Leach Seastrunk. Call me crazy. There's been a lot of good press about him out of Dallas. But, hey, if you're going to draft one guy, obviously it should be Joseph Randle. And if you hit on him, that's great value. You're going to get great value where you do find him. Be careful, though, because there's going to be one guy in your league who really, really goes crazy and overdrafts him. Don't be that guy, because there's other options around here. One of those would be Latavius Murray. We're into 21 now. Into the 20s. We'll speed through this and get you out of here happy. Latavius Murray of the Raiders. Yes, the physical skills are there. Why hasn't he shown us that until the very end of last year? They weren't keeping him on the bench just to save him up for something. There's reasons he was not on the field ahead of Darren McFadden, ahead of guys like that. I'm excited to see what he can do. Much like Randle, you need to see it over a full season, week to week, 20 touches a week, wear and tear on the body. But this is a starting running back. Once you start getting into these 20s into this region, you just want a starter. You want a guy that's going to touch the football guaranteed every week. I will take that over a high upside guy any day. Someone who I know is going to be on the field touching the ball at least 15 times. And that's who Latavius Murray is. Another one of those guys is at 22, TJ Yeldon. Everything that I'm seeing out of Jacksonville says that he is the starter. Regardless of what people want to tell you, Yeldon's the starter, and he has the potential to work on all three downs. Now, his challenge will be working in the same backfield as Blake Bortles, who was downright awful last year. He's got to take a massive step forward, and we don't talk about him being a bust last year, and thank God we don't. That's not the word we should use, but it's almost like people are giving him a free pass. It's like, oh, it's just the Jaguars. Let him figure it out. Well, for TJ Yeldon's sake, he better, and a guy like Julius Thomas will help. Those wide receivers getting better. Allen Robinson, he'll help. Trust me, he will help, especially in the red zone. So that should open up some work for TJ Yeldon. Hopefully that third down role will keep him on the field for passes. We'll see. If you're getting him around the 20th, 22nd ranked running back, absolutely fine value. And if he does surprise, there's keeper value. Now at number 3, this is my where the hell do you rank him of the rankings. I've got Arian Foster at number 23. We don't know when he will be back. I've seen him ranked as high as the late teens. I've seen him ranked as low as the 40s. If I were to take Arian Foster around this value, and he came back in week 6, 7, or 8, I'd be happy with that. This is something where people are, they're going to be all over the place. So if you're way off on this, let me know. Tweet me at the Backup Punter. Tell me where you've got Arian Foster, where you'd be happy drafting him. But if I can scoop him up in round 8 or 9 even, I think that's pretty good. Because if you get him back later in the season, and he turns into the Arian Foster we know and love, then you're going to win your league, as long as you can keep the rest of your roster afloat. So you've got to be a confident owner. You've got to know what you're doing at running back. It's kind of like the Le'Veon Bell situation, but instead of 2 weeks, you probably need 6 or 8. Well, maybe you grab an Alfred Blue or a D'Angelo Williams. Ride them for a couple of weeks, and by that point, there's going to be someone else hurt, someone else on waivers pop up. You can patch it together. You can even find someone else in your draft and roll with that for a bit. Maybe trade them later on when Foster comes back. But if you handle Arian Foster correctly, he might be the nuclear weapon of this draft. This guy that you return in the middle of the season and your roster just takes off. Then again, maybe he doesn't come back, or he comes back at half health and he screws you over. This is the risk you're going to have to take. At 24, I've got CJ Spiller. We already talked about him. He's going to have some big weeks. He's going to have some bad weeks, but the big ones will be week winners for you. It's a risky one. I'd like to see how he's used, even in the preseason. I'd like to see how he's used through week 1 and 2. Might not be a risk that I take, but for the right value, why not? Number 25, a running back that I'll probably target later in most of my drafts, Doug Martin. He looks like he's the starting running back on a team with a rookie quarterback. Why the hell not? He's going to see touches. Is he going to turn into what he was in his rookie year? Well, maybe not, but he doesn't have to. If you're getting him at this point and he even flirts with 1,000 yards, fantastic. He's a guy that you can plug in, maybe as a risky RB2, but as a flex or a very good bench option. And if you stash him on your bench or in a flex, and he does turn into a starting running back, 20, 25 touches a game, someone's going to want to trade with you. Right after that, I have Andre Ellington of the Cardinals at 26. This one is iffy. He could fall off this list if the Cardinals do sign Chris Johnson, which is a stupid idea. I don't know why they've offered Chris Johnson a contract. He is so far done. Last I heard, he'd been shot, I think, in the offseason. And that certainly didn't help his old legs either. But right now, it looks like today, Andre Ellington will be getting the bulk of the carries there. David Johnson behind him could take some receiving stuff, but I don't think he's ready to take any between the tackles work away from Ellington. The obvious drawback with Ellington, he's small, and there's going to be a lot of wear and tear. He's going to end up injured at some point, but maybe you get some good weeks out of him. It's risky. 27, I have Tevin Coleman of the Atlanta Falcons. This is a tough backfield. If I had to place $1 on it right now, I would bet on Tevin Coleman. And he's one of these guys that if you're patient with him, I think by mid-season, you're going to have their starting running back. And at this place, this value, I think that's okay. Number 28, Joique Bell of the Detroit Lions. This is a guy who I don't think will be the starter by the end of the season, but if you can get some starts out of him earlier in the year, then maybe that bridges the gap to a Foster, to a Le'Veon Bell, something like that. But I think all season long, regardless of whether Amir Abdullah takes over or not, Joique Bell's going to be the touchdown guy. He's going to be the red zone carries. And even as a starter, he can do fine. He's not elite by any means. He's pretty average. But he should get some usage. 29, let's give the Cleveland Browns a little bit of love. I've got Isaiah Crowell here. Isaiah Crowell, even before he signed with the Cleveland Browns last year, as an undrafted free agent, I listed him as my number one, my favorite UDFA out of last year's draft. He had some off-field stuff that kept him very much undraftable, but he seems to have kept it together since getting to Cleveland. If the season started today, I'd put him in as the starter for the Cleveland Browns, and he's going to get a lot of work, especially if he can catch some balls out of the backfield from Josh McCown or Johnny Manziel, whoever it ends up being. And at 29, if you can hit it with a starting running back behind a pretty decent offensive line, that's good value. And at number 30, because I refuse to leave him off the top 30, Bishop Sankey of the Tennessee Titans. I've went on about Bishop Sankey a couple times now. I think he is underrated. I think he's a starting running back in this league. And I think that a lot of people have just turned him into this joke. Oh, Bishop Sankey sucks. Well, shut up. No, he doesn't. He's had 1 year in the league. Le'Veon Bell was terrible in his first year, too. He couldn't really get past the line of scrimmage that often. He wasn't much in the passing game. Give Bishop Sankey some time. If the Titans can turn things around as a whole, that'll make some more openings for him. Their defense is a bit better. They've got Marcus Mariota to take some eyes off him. I like Bishop Sankey, especially at this value. So that's the top 30. I'll give you a couple tiers of flyers to take here, and then I'll let you go. So tier 1 of the flyers I might look at outside of the top 30, Amir Abdullah, Ryan Matthews, LeGarrette Blount. These are guys that either from injury or performance or from just regular touches could become starters. And if you're looking in the late rounds, you want a guy who has a chance to be a starter. Who is the most likely starter out of all the running backs remaining? And then tier 2 flyers, looking a little further down, Duke Johnson of the Cleveland Browns. If Isaiah Crowell does not perform, or if Duke Johnson just really breaks out, he could be a starter. Or he could be a 50-50 split, almost like a CJ Spiller type, who's capable of having a really big game. Cameron Artis-Payne of the Carolina Panthers is another one that I'll be looking at late, because if Jonathan Stewart is injured, I think Artis-Payne is going to get those touches. And then again, Andre Williams of the New York Giants. A lot of reports that Rashad Jennings is taking snaps with the number 2s, Williams with the 1s. That's just fodder for articles. Don't pay attention to any of that. This guy's with the 1s, this is with the 2s. It's really overblown. But I think Andre Williams definitely has the shot. Rashad Jennings is 30. Andre Williams is young. They drafted him high. They used it. How about that? It's late in the show. They used a draft asset on the guy, a high one, and they didn't do that just for fun. They're going to give this guy the opportunity. He needs to show much better vision, but if he can, and if that passing offense can help out, why can't he be a top 20 running back? I see no reason why. So keep an eye out for them as well. So that's it. That's all for the running back rankings this week on the Backup Punter Podcast. We've still got the wide receivers and tight ends remaining. Maybe I'll try to put those into one big show just to be sure you have everything you need prior to your draft. I will not be doing a top 30 kickers podcast as much as I would like to, because I know no one would listen. But I still very much believe in the value of winning your fantasy leagues by streaming the correct kickers and the correct defenses. I'll have a little on that before we get into the fantasy season on a future podcast. That and just some general draft strategy and some draft rules. So for this week, that was the running back rankings, and I thank you for listening once again. Like I said, this is episode number 20 of the Backup Punter Podcast. I appreciate you listening each and every week, subscribing, liking it on Facebook, following on Twitter. And be sure to send in your questions. Keep in mind, we're ranking wide receivers, ranking tight ends next week, but nothing is off limits. So tweet in to @TheBackupPunter. Should I keeper this guy or should I keeper that guy? How high is too high to draft this guy? Should I trade this guy for this guy? Hit me up. I'll get back to you, and I will feature it on the show. So my name's Keegan Matheson here, signing off. Episode 20. We've made it this far. Hopefully there's 20 more, and 20 more after that. As always, I hope that all of your punts in life stop on the 1-yard line. Thanks for listening. Let's talk next week.